Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We're going to take a look at CervoMed. I'm sure you've heard about it, and its stock surging recently.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, over 160% in just one day. That's
It's pretty amazing.
that's going to get attention.
hmm
And the story behind this is pretty interesting. CervoMed is a company that's working on treatments for age-related neurological disorders,
Right.
and they seem to have hit on something pretty significant. So, what can you tell us about what makes CervoMed so interesting right now?
Well, I think that their work on dementia with Lewy bodies is one of the reasons why.
Okay, so dementia with Lewy bodies.
Yeah, DLB.
DLB.
Mhm.
For our listeners who maybe aren't familiar, can you just give us a quick overview of what DLB is and why it's so significant?
Well, DLB is a brain disorder, and it's the second most common type of dementia after Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really tough to diagnose because it shares symptoms with both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease.
Oh, I think.
So patients might experience memory issues and difficulty with movement, hallucinations, and their alertness and attention can fluctuate.
So there are no FDA-approved treatments right now specifically for DLB.
That's right.
That's what makes CervoMed's work so potentially groundbreaking.
Exactly.
So this lack of treatments is a huge opportunity for companies like CervoMed.
It is.
So let's talk about CervoMed's drug, neflamapimod.
Sure.
This is intended to treat DLB, but it's had its ups and downs.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that?
So the initial results from CervoMed's phase 2b trial were a disappointment.
Okay.
The drug just didn't achieve its primary or secondary goals, and the stock took a pretty big hit.
Really?
It went from $14 a share down to about $2.
Oh my gosh. That's a huge drop, especially in biotech where, risks and rewards are already so high.
Right.
But then something changed.
Well, the extension phase of that same trial produced positive results, and that's what is fueling this current surge that we're seeing.
So it was the same trial, just an extension.
The same trial and extension.
Okay, so what led to such different outcomes between the initial trial and then the extension?
CervoMed discovered a problem with the capsules that were used in the initial trial.
Oh.
The drug wasn't being absorbed properly into the bloodstream, so the bioavailability was off.
Oh.
They fixed this with a new batch of capsules for the extension phase,
Interesting.
and the results showed a marked improvement.
So the market really reacted to this news?
It did.
So we saw the stock price just go through the roof.
It went from $2.36 to $6.17 on March 12th.
Wow. And the volume of trading exploded. Over 158 million shares were traded in a single day.
Right.
That's massive compared to their usual daily volume.
Yeah, it's usually around 500,000,
Yeah.
so that's a big jump.
So that kind of volume surge is a strong signal of investor interest.
Definitely.
So there's been talk of a short squeeze impacting this surge.
Why?
Can you explain what a short squeeze is and how it relates to CervoMed?
Sure. A short squeeze happens when a stock price rises sharply, and that forces those who had bet against the stock, the short sellers, to buy shares to cover their position. And this buying pressure then further pushes the price up.
Oh, I see. So the high short interest in CervoMed, around 17%, amplified the price movement when this positive news hit. And those short sellers were scrambling to buy shares, pushing the price up even higher.
It's a textbook example of how short squeezes work.
Interesting. What about analysts? How have they responded to this news?
Well, analyst sentiment has shifted, and several firms have raised their target prices for CervoMed.
Oh, really?
Brookline Capital Markets raised their target to $16
Okay.
with a buy rating,
And Roth MKM raised theirs to $15.
up from $7.
Wow. That's a huge show of mandates.
It is. It indicates that they view CervoMed now as a potential leader in the DLB treatment market, but we should remember that it is still very early,
Right.
and there's a long road to FDA approval.
So it's definitely something to watch closely. The technical analysis of CervoMed's stock is interesting, too.
Who is it?
The stock price has broken through its 50-day moving average, and that's a good sign.
It does suggest that the short-term trend is favoring CervoMed.
But the Relative Strength Index, or RSI, shows the stock is now in overbought territory. So what does that mean for potential investors?
The RSI is a momentum indicator, and when it's in overbought territory, it suggests that the stock's price has risen too quickly,
Oh.
and that it might be due for a pullback or a correction.
So while the upward trend might continue, a correction is definitely a possibility.
Right.
And we know the biotech world is known for its volatility.
Very much so. Speaking of volatility, the recent news from Novo Nordisk is a good example.
Yeah.
Their trial disappointments sent their stock tumbling.
Oh, yeah.
And that just emphasizes that setbacks can happen,
Right.
even with promising treatments. And investor sentiment can change really quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, CervoMed's success is going to hinge on continued positive data from their trials, successfully navigating the regulatory process, and ultimately getting FDA approval for neflamapimod.
Right.
So there are definitely some challenges ahead. But if they succeed, the impact for DLB patients could be enormous.
It really could be.
So we've covered a lot about CervoMed in this first part. We'll be back soon to explore what this potential success could mean for the market and for patients.
Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We've been talking about CervoMed and this company that's developing a treatment for dementia with Lewy bodies.
And it has been a wild ride for CervoMed, hasn't it?
It has.
From that initial setback in their phase 2b trial to the recent success in the extension phase.
A really good illustration of the ups and downs of biotech.
Yeah, their stock was practically written off, and now they're seen as a potential leader in a multi-billion-dollar market.
Yeah.
It's like a comeback story.
It is.
Let's explore the potential impact here. If CervoMed gets through the remaining clinical trials and receives FDA approval for neflamapimod,
Huge.
the implications could be huge.
Yeah.
So let's break it down, starting with the patients.
Right.
What would an effective DLB treatment mean for them?
Well, it would be a game changer.
Yeah.
DLB is a debilitating disease. It affects cognitive abilities, independence, quality of life, and right now treatments just manage symptoms.
Yeah, so neflamapimod could offer a real chance to slow down or even stop the disease's progression.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
And that hope translates into a potential market worth billions of dollars.
Wow.
The demand for a DLB treatment would be massive given, the aging global population and the growing prevalence of dementia.
So neflamapimod could be a blockbuster drug.
It could.
Transform CervoMed.
Absolutely.
And reshape dementia care.
And I think it could have a ripple effect, too.
Oh,
Success for CervoMed could lead to more research and development in neurodegenerative diseases, and we might even see breakthroughs in treatments for other types of dementia, like Alzheimer's.
So it's fascinating to consider the potential impact of one company. But as we've mentioned, it all depends on continued positive results and regulatory approval.
It does. The positive results from the extension phase are a good sign, but they need to be confirmed in larger, more rigorous clinical trials, and even with success there, the FDA might not grant approval.
So there's still a long way to go.
There is.
Investors need to proceed carefully.
For sure.
Speaking of investors, I'm sure they're wondering what this all means for them. So what should investors be thinking about with CervoMed?
Well, there are a few key questions they should be asking themselves.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, how comfortable are they with risk? Biotech is inherently risky, and CervoMed is still in the early stages of development.
Not for the faint of heart, especially after seeing what happened with Novo Nordisk.
Exactly. Investors also need to consider their investment timeline. Are they looking for short-term gains, or are they willing to hold for the long haul?
I think perhaps the most important question is how much do they believe in CervoMed's ability to execute?
Yeah, that boils down to assessing the management team, their track record, and their strategic plan.
So investors need to do their homework.
Thorough due diligence is crucial. They should scrutinize the clinical trial data, the competitive landscape, the regulatory risks.
And be prepared for volatility. Biotech stocks can be unpredictable.
They can, and it's important not to invest more than they can afford to lose. This is a speculative investment, and there's always the chance that the stock price could drop if the company runs into obstacles.
That's a good point. We've covered a lot of ground on CervoMed today, from the science to the market dynamics and now the investor's perspective.
It's a complex story with a lot of moving parts.
In our final part, we'll look at some specific factors investors might want to consider as they evaluate this opportunity, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We've been taking a pretty close look at CervoMed.
We have. We've talked about their journey to developing this treatment for DLB.
Right, and explored the market dynamics and considerations for investors surrounding this stock surge.
Yeah.
So now let's consider some key factors investors might want to weigh as they assess this opportunity. What are the biggest risks here for investors?
One of the major risks is that the positive results from the extension phase, they might not be replicated in the larger phase 3 trials.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those trials are going to be more comprehensive, larger patient group, longer observation period. It's possible the initial results were a statistical anomaly. or the effectiveness of the drug decreases over time.
So investors shouldn't get ahead of themselves.
Now, be cautious. Another risk is regulatory hurdles. Even if phase 3 trials are successful, the FDA might not approve it. The regulatory process is really intricate and can be unpredictable.
Right.
The FDA might require additional studies.
Oh, I see.
Or have concerns about the safety or effectiveness of the drug.
And we can't forget about competition either.
Oh, that's right.
Other companies were working on treatments for DLB as well, and some are further along in the development process.
Right. So CervoMed might be seen as the leader right now, but that could change if a competitor brings a better drug to market first.
So investors need to be aware of all these potential challenges, but let's look at the other side. Let's talk about the potential rewards.
Okay.
What factors could make CervoMed a successful investment?
Well, the potential rewards are substantial. If they can successfully develop and launch neflamapimod, it could become a major player in this multi-billion-dollar market for DLB treatment.
Right.
So the possibility of improving lives.
Yeah.
Of so many patients, and generating really significant returns for early investors is enticing.
So it sounds like investors really need a balanced perspective here,
They do.
recognizing both the risks and the rewards. So what advice would you give to someone considering investing in CervoMed?
I think thorough research is paramount here.
Yeah.
Really examine the clinical data, understand the competitive landscape,
Yeah.
don't underestimate the regulatory risks.
And be prepared for that volatility that comes with biotech stocks.
Yeah, don't invest more than you can afford to lose. This is a speculative investment, and the stock price could drop significantly if the company faces any setbacks.
So we've covered a lot in this episode of Investing Talk podcast. We've explored CervoMed's journey, the science, the market dynamics, and what investors need to consider. We hope you found this discussion insightful. Remember to subscribe to Investing Talk podcast, like this episode, and leave us a comment. We appreciate your feedback. Until next time, happy investing.